Being great at sales is essential to your business and your career, but you and I both know that the stress of selling and dealing with constant rejection can be an emotional drain. My entire brand, No BS Selling, is based on the belief that professional sales is a skill and not a personality, and that to be better at sales takes constant refinement and a dedication to your craft. This show is for salespeople and entrepreneurs who are committed to improving their sales skills and getting better results, and are sick and tired of the BS game that often happens between buyers and sellers. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast, and I'm your host, Walker McKay. I'll help you and your sales team make selling easier, feel less cheesy, and be more lucrative. It's time to change the rules and level the playing field between you and the people you sell to. You're already good, let's be better. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast, and I'm your host, Walker McKay. Super excited today to have as my guest Greg Rosner, who is the principal and founder of a company called Pitch Kitchen. And they do strategic sales messaging. Greg has his company up in New York. We met, I was on a LinkedIn Live with him a couple of weeks ago. He's a super smart guy. Today, we're going to talk about 12 essential sales conversations, because this is a book that Greg is writing. And I think this is right up our alley, No BS Sales Team. So get ready. Let's welcome Greg Rosner to the No BS Sales Podcast. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Walker.
So glad you're here. Greg, one of the things we share in common, and quite frankly, it's how we got introduced, is our both love of the outdoors and hunting. And I've been doing that for about 30 years. And apparently you're newer to it, right? In the last 4 or 5?
Yeah, I'm a newbie. I think I've been hunting for 4 years now. And,
and you said you had a story you wanted to share, and this is cold for me. So let's find out, what's the story you wanted to share about a hunting trip where you had some lessons recently?
Yeah, so the lessons are really about me and how I view my life and animals in the world. And it's kind of a breakthrough I had, and I guess it's leading up to what I've been thinking about and processing over the last few years. So, I'll tell you what happened real quick. I've been hunting for a few years, and on Saturday I was out there and, all day just getting
deer hunting, right?
Yeah, deer hunting, getting glimpses of bucks and of does. But I really didn't have a clear shot all morning. And then in the afternoon, there I saw what I thought were two doe.
Hold on one second, Greg. Did you literally sit all day?
Oh yeah, that's since before sunrise.
Holy shit, you stayed in the stand from before sunrise till all day?
Well, I had I was in there all day, and I have a little bottle to, let things out in.
That's South Carolina style. We sit about an hour and a half at a time. But that's okay. Continue with your story. You're good. That's awesome. Yeah. Go ahead.
So it's all day, and staying warm in New York right now is pretty tough. So my main focus was taking the chill off my hands and feet. But anyway, that's not the main story. So I'm going to pause that for a minute before I tell you about the doe I had in my sights, and just say I've been a meat eater for my whole life. I've eaten anything, carnivore. I used to say a seafood diet. Right. I see it, I eat it. And, but over the last few years, I realized that, gosh, I can eat anything. And I love the taste of meat. And I think that's kind of the reason why I wanted to learn how to hunt, because in my whole life, I have never been on the front end of the meat business. I've always been on the back end of the meat business, choosing what to eat and, how to cook it, grill it, fry it, steam it, whatever. But one of the reasons why I wanted to hunt deer is because I wanted to see what it was like to kill on the front end, as opposed to just pay a butcher or pay a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
And for most people, I don't think most people have the privilege of hunting. And I'm licensed by the Department of Environmental Conservation, as you are, I suppose. We get licenses to take out overpopulated animals such as deer. And so there this doe was in my sights, and there was another doe I thought behind it, and I was waiting until the perfect shot, because I want to make it a clean kill as
ethical. Yes.
And so I pulled the trigger, and bam, the animal went down right where I shot it, which was surprising. And, I counted till about 14 Mississippi before, the legs started, stop kicking. But I think what really freaked me out was the mother. I realized that I'd shot a button buck, and the mother was freaked out.
Yep.
And I think that whole moment I started to really feel like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. Hold on one second, because not everybody knows what a button buck is. A button buck is probably a year old or a year and a half old buck. It's got little teeny, they look just like does almost. Their faces a little differently shaped. They got tiny little buttons, not quite horns on their head.
Yeah.
And it's a mistake that, it happens all the time. People mistake them for
doe.
It's not unusual.
Yeah. So I did mistake it for a doe, but nevertheless, I had a DEC tag for that animal, right? So, and so whatever, then my hunting buddy came over, and he, took me through the whole process of, my hands were cold. And it was like a Luke Skywalker moment, getting shoved inside the tauntaun, I don't know if you've that scene, but, so I gutted the animal, and it was beautiful.
On the spot. Do you field dress it there?
Yeah, on the spot. And so It was a beautiful animal, beautiful inside. It was gorgeous and perfect and so similar to the anatomy of a human. I was like, holy, this is unreal. But it was very real for me. And then, I processed like that night, like, what am I doing? Like all the food that I can eat, so I've decided, and this is going to sound crazy. I'm sure people are going to be like, who are you? And what are you, some kind of wimp or something? But I've decided I'm done with eating red meat, any kind of, after that experience. I'm only going to eat, I'm going to go hunting again, but I'm going to hunt turkey and fowl. But I'm not. I'm done with eating red meat after that experience.
Was it because it was too close to human?
Yes.
I get it. I understand.
Yeah. Also, the experience I saw, the mother panic, and I realized that there's almost. I was projecting a little bit of feelings, maybe too much, but we don't know what animals feel. So, in truth, and science doesn't really know either. So, that's the decision that I made. I just want to share that with you.
I totally get it, and I think it's fine. It's what I love. I used to love the hunting and the shooting, and what I love now as much as the farming. Right, it's the preparing and the putting up deer stands and being out there with my boys. And I had the experience this past weekend. My oldest son killed a doe, and for the first time, he cleaned it himself. And he's 16, and that's a big, usually we just take it to the processor, but he cleaned it himself. He skinned it and cleaned it. And it was, he was so excited. And I get fascinated by the biology of it. So anyway, well, I hope that wasn't too terrible of an experience for you. I hope that was a cool moment overall. Now you've done that, checkbox, move on, right?
Yeah, no, it was a great experience. I loved it. I'll never forget it. And,
did you ever read Michael Pollan?
No.
Michael Pollan writes a lot about natural food and the process of it, as Pollen, or maybe AN, I'm not sure which. And he writes, anyway, there's a whole bunch of books. He's written about 10 about the process of food and growing. And I think it might be an interesting book for you to read, and I'll send you the link after this. But anyway, I think you might enjoy that. So let's jump back to business. So tell me, Greg, what does strategic sales messaging mean?
Yeah, so if you think about it, every sale happens because of a conversation or a series of conversations. I like to say that every business is built one conversation at a time. Mountains of business, millions of dollars of business is essentially It essentially happens because of someone talked to somebody and had an understanding, and there was a breakthrough and a trust, and allowed that change to happen, or allowed that.
Yep.
So strategic sales messaging is helping businesses clarify who they are, what problem they're solving, and what conversations need to take place to help their customers make that leap, make that change.
Give me an example, Greg, of somebody you've worked with maybe recently that was struggling with this, and what you do to help them.
So every customer that we talk to, our customers are CEOs of particularly tech or SaaS or services companies who they've got small sales teams, and they've recognized that the sales slides that they're using are pretty much telling a story about how awesome they are and how their solution is perfect, how it's end to end and all this seamless BS.
Yep.
And you cut through the
all
BS
the all the marketing crap that the people that marketing crap. Yes.
And they think that that is actually what's needed to have breakthrough conversations with customers. But when I say they think, most CEOs I think now are coming to realize that that doesn't work anymore, that their conversations or the slides, I like to use slides and conversations as one and the same, because if you put a slide up there, that begs to be the platform for a conversation about something. Like, right. What is the discussion about? And so that brings me to this 12 essential conversations that every sale requires, because I've worked on literally 1,000+ sales presentations for companies, and I have found a pattern.
Let me stop you for a second. So when it's a sales presentation, and you're talking about in a SaaS software as a service or some kind of high tech thing, where often you're not meeting somebody face to face, you're doing something over a webinar or over Zoom or something like that. Is that correct?
Well, it's really both. I think it's both remote presentations and in boardroom presentations.
Sure.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. To better tell the story and to better create a conversation. So you talked about 12 sales conversations that are necessary. Give me one.
Well, I like to think of the 12 as in buckets of 3.
Okay.
So if you got 3 buckets, and the first bucket is problem bucket, second is a solution bucket, and the third bucket is what I call the plan bucket. So in each bucket, there's 4 possible conversations take place. And if, for example, in the problem bucket, there's conversations there about the current state that you're in. Like, is this really where you're at today? And do I understand where you're at today? And it's an opportunity to reflect back what you understand, but also give your customer a chance to say where they're at.
Yeah, sure.
Current results. So that's a whole conversation to take place. That's a whole slide, if you will. And in that first bucket, there's also a conversation about aspirations or goals. What are you trying to accomplish in the future, given your current state? So it's a conversation about goals, but it belongs in the problem bucket because you're not there today. You don't have that today. That's right. A desire, and that's a desire of something you don't have is in the problem bucket conversation. So
you and I are on the same page there, because we realize, buying is an emotional decision. Making a decision is an emotional. People make decisions emotionally, and they justify it intellectually. And most of the time, what they're doing is trying to fill a gap between where they are and where they want to be. And so you're hitting on something that's right up the alley, right what I talk to my clients about. Continue on. You're great. So we talked about current state and then aspirations. What's another one?
Yeah. So in that first bucket, we're still dealing with another conversation that we call problems. And so instead of sales reps having a presentation, basically, or a conversation that starts with, so tell me what keeps you up at night? Or
oh, God, the worst fucking sales question on the planet. What keeps you up at night? It's fucking stupid. It drives me crazy. I wish people just forget that forever.
Yeah, but they don't. So the right conversation in that first bucket around problems is really laying out sort of the top 3 typical problems that customers your shape and size are dealing with the hope that you can articulate your customers' problems even better than they could describe it themselves, which if you can do that, you'll automatically be positioned as having the best solution.
So I hear you loud and clear, because I work on this too. Give me an example of this. Instead of the marketing version of whatever, how do you describe somebody's problems as if they would describe them? How do you do that? Give me an example of that.
Well, on that particular slide, that would,
but just pick a customer and tell me maybe what they used to say and what they say now.
So most customers don't even have a slide that articulates the problems. They just want to have happy talk.
They don't have one at all. Right, yes.
They just want to happy talk. They don't really want to spend the time to talk about problems. They want to spend the time to talk about how awesome their shit is, and talk about all it can do.
You know why they do that?
Why?
Because they memorize that shit. Because they can control it. It doesn't take much thinking. All they have to do is memorize the marketing shit, memorize the same pitch over and over again.
Yeah.
Because if you're asking questions and actually having a conversation, it doesn't feel like you're in control anymore. So that's why people love the slides. Like, hold your questions till we get through the 260-second slide. I'm in control here. Well, that's bullshit. You're more people most of the time. So you're showing people how to have a more interactive session, if you will.
Well, that's really the core. I mean, I'd like to just stop right there and say that if you're in sales and you're coming into a presentation, what you want to have happen is something that you could never even imagine happening prior to that meeting, because you're putting yourself in an open place where you're asking questions and really sincerely curious about how you're going to help this customer. And you don't know the answers. You don't know them.
Yep.
And I think and a lot of salespeople, everybody I think is uncomfortable with the unknown, and they like to come in and just, press play on the tapes.
Right. Yeah.
And even like if a customer asks a question, they just press that button that plays a certain tape, but doesn't really like pause and put your own intentions to sell and your intentions to make quota aside just for like a moment, and really see how could we help this person talk about and get them to talk about what these three problems that I've just laid out, and which one is hitting them the hardest.
Dude, you are singing my song right here. And can I back you up 1 second?
Sure.
I think where a lot of salespeople miss it, and you and I think are on the same page here, but I just want to make sure we're not missing this. We are not the right fit for everybody. And even though somebody does have a problem, maybe that we can fix, it may not be a priority for them, or they may not want us to fix it, or they don't have any money to fix it, or they're a pain in the ass, we don't want to work with them. And so before we even talk about the problems that we might solve, I want to figure out, do I even want to work with this person? And do they have anything that's worth my working on? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. But for a bag carrying salesperson with a quota, that takes a leap of faith and trust, I think.
100%. I agree with you. And you got to have a pipeline. You got to be willing to walk away, because the reality is, if they're not ready, if they're not going to spend the money, if they're not committed to fix a problem, if it's not the priority, they're not going to freaking buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love where you're going there. All right. So we talked about 3 buckets. We talked about 3 questions: current state, aspirations, problems. What's the next one?
So those 3 conversations belong in the first bucket, the problem bucket.
Yep.
There's another in that first section we call status quo. But if we move on to the solution, the second bucket, that's really where you're sort of stepping outside of their world and you're going into a much larger world. That's where you are taking the position as the Obi-Wan or the Dumbledore, or the Mary Poppins, or the cardiologist.
Yeah,
you're moving into that role. So look, I've heard you. I've heard where you're at. I do understand. So let me now pivot and talk a little bit about something that I think you're going to be interested in hearing. And this is where the Challenger sale also exemplifies, talking about how the world has changed and pointing out things and things in the world that is going to be, and if the customer hasn't already experienced these changes, that they need to recognize that they really need to move and change with the times. And if they don't, they'll suffer the consequences, and they're going to be winners and losers to that.
So how does that work if you're selling? But I guess if you're working with SaaS people that are building, selling technology, and typically it's be more and more modern technology, right? So they're getting rid of outmoded. Most of your guys are selling against outmoded, or what they will soon learn is outmoded software. So I guess that does make sense, because I was thinking, what if you sell forklifts?
Right, or minivans.
Minivans.
Yeah, so if you're selling within the category and you just want to sell the best of the category, that conversation, the world has changed, in that second bucket may not be a slide you want to use.
So what I heard you just say was, your stuff is not the right fit for everybody, and I freaking respect the hell out of you for that. That's great.
Yeah, it may not be, that conversation may not be the right one. But if you do have a differentiator, let's say, your differentiator between your competition of your forklift is this one factor, this one piece. That maybe it's the angle, maybe it's the pressure, maybe it's some piece. So you can talk about how the world has changed, that you can't use the same tool for every job. And, if your world includes this need to be able to achieve the X, well, you can't use that in this new world. So, I mean, you can draw upon that that kind of framework of old.
And no matter what you're selling, though, I think the most key word in your last sentence, whether you're selling SaaS software or forklifts, for the example, is if. Because I want it to be a question. I don't want it to be a you need this. I think we don't need to make assumptions too soon. I think you and I, again, same tracking on that anyway. So continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's absolutely right. Anytime you're telling someone what they need, people believe in the things that they themselves decide, not the things you tell them.
Yes.
So, and often I shut down when people tell me what I need, even if it's exactly what I need. Someone says, I need to see a chiropractor, go screw yourself.
Right.
And then next week I'll go see a chiropractor on my own terms.
Yeah, well, I think people have to earn the right to tell you what you need to do, because you risk being an idiot if you give somebody advice that they've already done and didn't work, or they've already thought about, or it doesn't make any sense to them. So, and I've had multiple examples of me doing that and it being done to me as well. So, agreed.
So the next conversation in that second bucket, the solution bucket, we call the trusted conversation. So it's a trusted conversation is, someone may not know you from Adam, and they may need to understand and see some social proof of how have you helped others in my situation before? And so, you may need to have that conversation, but you may not. If it's a referral, maybe that base is already covered.
Yep.
But that is one essential conversation to have to make customers feel comfortable, if they don't already, about how many customers you have, what you've done before, your track record. I mean, that's important stuff.
It is. I agree with you. To some people, that's going to be important, right? To some of your buyers, that'll be important. It may help build more trust. To others, it may not care.
They may not care. Exactly. They may not care because that base is already covered in their mind. And so these are almost bases, if you will. That's why I call them
I love it. No, it's good. They're buckets inside of buckets. You're exactly right.
Yeah, that's right. So another in the solution area is what I call the before and after story. So I think a conversation when someone says, okay, it's cool that you understand our problems, and it's great that you've got a lot of customers, and it's cool. In one conversation, that second area is what it is that you're selling. What is it? How does it work? What is the thing? But I think there's another conversation in that second bucket we call before and after. And before and after is a conversation where you're on one slide, on the left side, you're basically saying, this is typically how long it takes, how much it costs, and what quality you can expect in your current state. And you get the head's nod there. But on the right side is after you use this is what you can expect in terms of quality, cost, turnaround, whatever.
I like it. Okay.
And so if on one slide you're having a discussion about a before and after, a typical expectation of before and after, and it could be around one particular customer, or it can be just an industry focus of how the impact that you're making on the industry.
Yep.
I think that is an essential conversation for a sales process.
And so, okay, so you're saying either in the industry, this is how we typically fix it, or this is what people typically find, or with company ABC, we did this, and you may or may not name the company.
Right. It can be industry or a particular company. I like to think of this as not as a case study, but more of an overarching view of, look, for organizations or for companies your shape and size with X number of employees or X number of whatever, this is typically on the left side what your results are. Is this not correct? And they're going to look at those numbers and say, yeah, that's pretty much, our world on the left. And then you're pointing out on the right side, say, look, these are our customers after they've purchased whatever it is that we're selling.
So Greg, let me stop for a second. So we're making some assumptions here, because I went on a sales call the other day with a company in an industry I've worked with a bunch. And I asked some assumptive questions. I said, so when you figured out what your close ratio was, what is it? And they said something like 60%. And then I said, and how long does it take you from a lead coming in the door to your, getting a close? And they said a week. And all these things were way far above my expectations and my experience with others in their industry. And so, quite frankly, there one I said, look, you don't need my help. After the end of an hour conversation, they didn't need my help. I was afraid I would break something. They were going so well. I even challenged them to raise their prices if they're closing that much. And they said, hell, we're already the highest in the industry. And I was like, okay, well, shit, I don't want to get in the way of that. So you're making assumptions. What happens if the prospect at this point says, well, that's not really us. We fixed that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let's say the left side, you put what you understand typically the results in terms of speed, quality, time, and all the lenses, the vector. You put that out there, and they're like, you know what? That's not our world. That's not what we're dealing with. We're more closer to the after side. You know, we're there. We're after side. We're basically there. So at that point, if they're saying that, then there's maybe no need to talk any further.
Right.
You know, maybe it's like, hey, you know, you guys are golden.
Yep.
But it could be that, you know, that's not the truth. Maybe they think they're on those numbers is their current
You don't
state.
think that happens, do you? Either they don't know or they would lie to you. That's bullshit. Come on, Greg. That shit never happens. Let's talk real here. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Of course. You know, some people are living in the clouds sometimes, but sometimes people don't want to admit that 100%. The problem is as bad as it is. Yeah. And that's why I don't believe you can have the before and after conversation until you actually spend time in bucket number one, which is problem conversations. Because by the time you get to the second bucket and you're having a before and after story, you wouldn't even get there if they didn't admit to the things in the first section that you know are going to be represented in the before and after.
So this could be over several meetings is what you're talking about.
Several, or you can do it in 45 minutes. You can go through all 10 or 12 conversations.
Love this. All right, so help me now. We're getting lower on time. Can you go through the last couple of questions and then ones in plan?
Yeah, so in the plan section, there are 4 conversations to have. So, you know, one of them is outcomes, next is the plan, third is expectations, and the fourth is next steps. So outcomes is a really powerful conversation to have. And I think that's probably, in the whole presentation, outcomes in the third bucket is probably the most powerful because it creates a vision in their mind. They're creating the vision of what this could mean for them if they buy, that you as a salesperson never in a million years could dream of, because it comes from them. So for example, on the outcomes slide or conversation says, what would these results enable for you?
Aha.
So it's a discussion around results or outcomes. What would these outcomes or results enable for you? And if you let that stand, that question, after they've discussed the problem and they've earned trust, and after they see what solution you're offering and they've seen a before and after story, they are primed to actually think in their mind. Their neocortex should be lit up with what this would do for them. And they're primed for that conversation. And if they can articulate back to you, the salesperson, and say, look, you know, come to think of it, if we had this, hey, Bob, do you think this would allow us to sell more? Or this would allow us to dig more holes? Or this will allow us to whatever. And they're like, you know what, come to think of it, it might, it could. So people are already there in their mind. They're thinking like they're at that place of success. And that's where they can possibly get excited, which is, you know, if you don't have excitement, you know, that's really tough to sell anything.
Yeah, some kind of emotions. And so, and I think, and I want to bring us back down a little bit, because not everybody's going to buy. Yeah. Right. I mean, even if we say, you know, here, let's talk about what this thing could look like. Sometimes they're not thinking big enough, or sometimes it's just not a priority for them, or sometimes it's not whatever. And so I love the way you're having these conversations, because you're getting feedback along the way in real time, as opposed to going through your effing presentation with 64 slides. Please hold on while I read the slides to you. And boring everybody to death. And you may have wasted a ton of everybody's time.
Right. And every stop along the way, every slide you can turn left, turn off the projector, and just, you know, go anywhere, because what you're focused on is really what these conversations are revealing, not getting through them all. And it may take 5 meetings to go through all 12 conversations, and because you may not have all the right people, you know, connected with, and you may not have all your facts.
Can I share with you what I've learned today?
Sure.
I love the way you've broken the conversations into 3 big buckets: into problem, solution, and plan. I think it's very elegant, and it's beautiful the way you've done that. I think it's cool too. I don't know if I mentioned this already. Greg is writing a book that we published here probably in 2020. He's working on, doesn't know the title of the book yet, but it's the subtitle is probably 12 Essential Conversations That Change or Sales Require. And anyway, when that comes out, I'll put out a blurb. But I'm really excited you're writing this book and that you shared this stuff with us, because I think you've got great insight, Greg, into the sales process and also into where I think most people really screw it up is in the presentation process. I'm buying with you 100% there. Greg, how would people find you if they were looking for you?
Sure. You can go to pitchkitchen.com. Or you can find me, Greg Rosner, on LinkedIn. So on pitchkitchen.com, that's our company's website. We're based in New York. And LinkedIn, you can hit me up there. Love to connect with you and chat about what you're doing. And every week on LinkedIn, I run a show called Sales Therapy. And that actually may be the name of the book, by the way, Sales Therapy, the 12 Essential Conversations.
Love it.
So, you can watch that show, participate if you like. And so cool. Walker, this is awesome.
Greg, you're a super guest and a great guy. No BS Sales Team, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please, if you like this, subscribe, share it. It really helps if you rate it and review it. That raises the rankings. It's amazing how the audience is growing every single month. I love the No BS Sales Team growing. As you know, my goal is to, by the time I pass on to the great beyond, half of the salespeople in the world will not be as bad as they are right now. That'd be an awesome thing. Hey, Greg, thank you so much for being here. You are the man, and I really look forward to hearing your book and talking to you more in the future.
Thank you, Walker.